America's first serial killers. Kills the boy and burns the body. Killing for him is about power. The murder castle. H.H. Holmes was one of America's first serial killers. At the time of Jack the Ripper in London, Americans thought they were safe. But little did they know what horrors were inside a hotel just outside the Chicago World's Fair. H.H. Holmes is born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861. It's in his hometown of Gilmanton Academy, New Hampshire, that his interest in bodies begins. As a boy, he's terrified of the town doctor. Some local heathens lock him in the office with the doctor's skeleton. This incident cures him of his fear and starts him on the path to being a doctor. But first, a little romance. And I mean very little. He marries Clara Lovering on July 4th, 1878, but abandons her shortly after. He goes to University of Michigan Medical School in 1882, but also gets an education in fraud. During the summer of his junior year, he becomes a traveling book salesman, but instead of turning the money in, he just keeps it. He keeps buying things on credit and pocketing the proceeds instead of paying for the goods. And he keeps getting away with it, thanks to his remarkable charm, which he also uses to get a job at a drugstore in Chicago in 1885. It's owned and operated by a Mrs. Holton, whose husband is dying of cancer in the apartment upstairs. It's hard for her to care for her husband and run the store, so H.H., as he's now known, offers to buy the store and let them keep their apartment upstairs. But shortly after he becomes a business owner, Mrs. Holton suddenly and mysteriously moves to California. In 1887, he marries Myrta Belknap, even though he never actually divorces Clara, and they move into Mrs. Holton's now vacant apartment. Myrta helps run the drugstore, but gets jealous of the young ladies that come in and flirt with her husband. In the summer of 1888, a pregnant Myrta moves back in with her parents. Holmes visits her and their daughter, but enjoys having them not so close, because he has some other stuff to attend to. He purchases the empty lot across the street and builds a 3-story building of his own design, which includes a drugstore on the first floor, hotel on the second, and apartments on the top. Men are in large part turned away from the hotel, so it becomes filled with women for Holmes to prey on. He's a forgiving proprietor, often forgiving young women of their debts when they suddenly leave town without their belongings. His office is also on the second floor, which is complete with a soundproof vault that's hooked up to a gas line. The basement is outfitted with a kiln he says he uses for blowing glass, despite the fact that it's the wrong size for blowing glass. It is the right size for burning bodies, though. The killing for him is about power. He would seduce a woman, and once she was his, he would kill her. He does this with Julia Connor, who becomes pregnant during their affair. He convinces her he would marry her only if she gets an abortion, that he will perform. Instead, he just kills Julia and her 12-year-old daughter Pearl with chloroform. When asked, whatever happened to that Julia and Pearl, he would just say they moved back to Iowa. The consummate salesman, he even finds a way to profit from the bodies. He dissects the bodies to the point that they can't be recognized, because he's a doctor and he knows how to do that, and then he sells the skeletons to medical schools. He repeats this almost exactly with Emmeline Cigrand and Minnie Williams, whose sister Anna he also killed. He even fakes wedding announcements from Emmeline and a fictional man and sends them to her family. Never mind that she never mentioned this dude to anyone. By 1893, people begin to catch on to him. Creditors and private investigators put on the heat. The fall of that year, he's called to attorney George Chamberlain's office and is confronted by 24 creditors and a detective. He pleads, he charms, he's eventually told to go in the hallway while the creditors talk over what to do with him, and because they let him go in the hallway, he promptly flees the scene. He decides it's time to leave Chicago. Precious Minnie Williams had signed over her land in Texas to H.H., and that seemed as good a place as any to start over with his new bride, Georgiana Yoke. Don't worry, she doesn't get killed. He takes out an insurance policy on the life of his assistant/servant/helper, Benjamin Pietzel, who he brings with him. The plan is to fake Pietzel's death and collect the insurance. Well, that's Pietzel's plan. Holmes's plan doesn't involve a fake death, but a real one, because that's his thing. He then tricks Pietzel's wife into letting him bounce around the Midwest and Canada with 3 of her children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, to see their definitely not murdered father. Detective Frank Geyer tracks his journey and finds the bodies of Alice and Nellie in a cellar in Toronto. Holmes takes Howard to Indianapolis, where he kills the boy and burns the body. Holmes is finally arrested on November 17, 1894, tried and sentenced to death. The excavation of his building, known as the Murder Castle, uncovers, among other things, a vat of acid with 8 ribs in it, charred high-heel shoes, various bones in a kiln. He admitted to 27 murders, but some people he claimed to have killed were still alive, so we really have no idea how many people never left the murder castle.